Welcome to the Miscellaneous Film Festival, the podcast for curiously curated films. I'm Jacin.
And I'm Nick.
And this is our Occult Detectives Mini Film Fest.
Nick, I don't want to frighten you, but I think there's a spirit amongst us. I just heard it. Quick draw pentagram.
Indeed. Already drawn. Don't even worry about it.
I know. You're on top of it. So this kind of came up after our last episode when we talked about what comes next. Life after death, or is there? And I had already kind of been researching detective movies with kind of an occult theme or an occult bad guy. It was inspired by 1991's Cast a Deadly Spell, which I pitched to you as sort of if Lovecraft meant Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
With a lot of practical effects and puppets instead of cartoons.
Yeah, that feels right.
And from there, I started looking around saying, okay, what other movies have occult detectives or detectives solving occult mysteries? And we came up with these 6 movies. Dark Intruder from 1965, The Ninth from 2019, Cast a Deadly Spell from 1991, Lord of Illusions from 1995, Longlegs from 2024, and Waves of Madness, also from 2024. This is a special film we get to talk about because you actually know the director of that, Jacin Trost.
I do, yep, and I cut the trailer for it, too.
For those of you who haven't listened, please go back and check out our episode all about trailers, where Nick here talked about his career as a professional trailer editor in Hollywood.
How I'm a sub-professional trailer editor now. I do trailers for micro-budget movies. It's more fun. It's just way more fun.
Well, you also did a commercial for the Super Bowl, and that's big stuff.
Yep. However, it was
cool.
It was a win ad for Patrick Mahomes, so it never aired because he lost horribly.
Oh no! Oh no!
I've done win ads for different athletes throughout my career, and I think I'm 0 for 4. Like if I do your win ad, you're probably gonna lose.
Oh no! That is a great way. It is full of ominous portents. Nick Davis's trailers are the divination key to a win or a lose.
I should start gambling more on these things. Like, oh, I did the win ad. The other team's clearly going to win. I should put some money down.
I say go for it. Well, that kind of leads us into talking about the occult, which is a pretty broad subject. I was drawn into it when I was looking at the synopsis for Cast a Deadly Spell. I said, oh, is this a cult? What defines a cult and differentiates it from other thing? And realizing that word, at least in Hollywood, is a big umbrella where they put just about everything underneath it. And some things are and some things aren't. In my research, I kind of narrowed it down to occult just meaning hidden. And so it's a study of esoteric, lost knowledge about magic and interacting with the supernatural world. Demonology and stuff is mixed in there too, but it's distinct from witchcraft and distinct from voodoo. When you type in occult movies and search them, you'll get all sorts of stuff that is very specified and not necessarily the LaVeyan or Aleister Crowley kind of occult stuff. I know you have more of a background kind of with the darker side, or at least, I'm saying that from a very judgmental place. I realize I shouldn't say it that way. At least the satanic side of the occult.
Right. I think when it comes to like the occult, right? It's like there was the occult. There was all this old school stuff, and then religion came about. And religion kind of went, ooh, occult bad, religion, God good. And then occult kind of got slapped with a Satan label. But the Satan label is kind of religion talking about the occult. So yeah, it kind of all falls into that kind of magic, and we don't understand it, and we believe in God instead kind of world.
Which is how I grew up. Definitely things that were not the way we practiced could be labeled collectively as just satanic.
Right.
And not occult. I had to learn later that that's a perspective of saying if it's not about God and Jesus, not from the Bible, or it's against anything or contradicts anything like that, then we're demonizing it as satanic. It serves Satan. And then I had to learn how all these other different beliefs and different cultures worked and recognize, well, it is not Christianity. And if that's your only criteria, fine. But it also is not Satan. It's a completely separate belief that has nothing to do with Christianity.
Satan was slapped onto it, like as a label, more or less.
And one of the first things you said was a cult came first and then came religion. Is that right? Or is it there were all these different religions, all these different cultures and beliefs. They all were doing their own thing. And then Christianity has kind of been weaponized, or through the Romans became dominant and then forced upon everyone else, that pushed all these other beliefs and all these other writings into obscurity. And that's where they became hidden or lost, which is why they have the label occult.
Yeah, that I'd say that makes sense. I mean, even the Romans were kind of occulty before they found Christianity.
I mean, they were just doing their own thing. Those were all religions that were more prominent, that were actually, I mean, if we're going to be historically correct, were kind of pushing back against Christians and oppressing Christians.
Right.
And it's just the tables got turned, and then those beliefs and practices, those rituals, got suppressed and oppressed by the Christian church and the Catholics.
Yeah, I mean, I think for like the sake of this, it's like it's kind of that magic tarot-y world.
Right. It's a very Western, a very Christian-centric viewpoint, saying any kind of divination or alchemy, even,
right,
which is any study that's sort of outside the norm, could be called occult. I mean, we all know that through the advancement in technology and medicine, lots of things that were demonized at one point have now become mainstream because they're just proven out through science. Right. It's the workings of the natural world.
Right.
That brings up a great point about history, is that we often look back and think about, oh, what a bunch of ignorant bastards who thought the world was flat and shit, and realizing that so many different cultures, independent of one another, figured a lot of things out when it came to medicine and healing, even midwifery.
Right.
Stuff like that was considered outside the realm of practical knowledge and somehow witchcraft or whatever.
Yeah, but it work. So everyone's like, wait, well, that's not supposed to work. It's like, but it does.
Or someone who doesn't have power is doing it. Someone who doesn't have the authority via the mainstream belief system is doing it. Therefore, it is some kind of occult or
witchcraft, or I mean,
demonic. Yeah.
An example of that is just like how they would punish women during the time of the plague for having cats as witches, because they weren't getting sick because they had cats that were killing the rats, so they weren't getting sick from the rats. So it's like,
yeah,
just practical knowledge. But then it's like, oh no, it must be a witch, because they just didn't know.
Did you watch the latest like Disney Marvel series, Agatha All Along?
You know, I didn't. I've been struggling with Marvel as of late, and it's been hard for me to latch on. I got through about 15 minutes of it, and I was like, I just don't know. Maybe are you recommending it?
I am highly recommending.
Okay, cool.
As a very fun adventure dealing with witchcraft and having discussions like this within the story.
Oh, right on.
Of the women together commiserating about being witches and the tropes and negative cliches. I think it's a conversation that's very modern, that we now have the perspective and the freedom to step back and talk about witchcraft and talk about how it's been maligned.
Yeah.
Without this kind of worry from the censors or from the network. I mean, this is a Disney produced thing.
Right.
I know my background, which is very ignorant, which is very protected, very Christian centric view of everything that isn't what we believe is satanic. But what about you? I think you have a very different background with that.
I mean, I went to church for the first, 10 years of my life, but very sporadically. And then, because my mom was brought up very Catholic. So I was baptized and the whole deal. But my dad was much more practical, much more philosophically based. And so we stopped doing the church thing. We'd go on Easter and Christmas just as kind of a traditional, you have to bore the kids to sleep kind of thing.
I never thought of it that way. Give them a bunch of sugar and some presents, and then they'll just pass out. Thank goodness.
Out. Yeah, exactly. So I always kind of, as a result of that, I always kind of messed with the religious kids. So I would like in speech class, I would dress up like a warlock and try to buy people's souls and like do a lot of Hail Satan stuff. And it it was this macabre, like, I really was into horror stuff at a really young age, and it was acceptable in my household, so I just leaned into it a little bit, and it allowed me to kind of mess with people, and messing with them gave me such joy that I found, like, I kind of like this Satan thing. It's kind of fun, to be honest with you. So I just enjoyed the idea of this thing that scared people so much that I was all imagined in my head. Like, I never really, I didn't like face the devil and yeah, exactly. None of that stuff. It was just kind of me just playing around, and it would genuinely scare people. And then when I'd get really serious about it, it would really scare people. So I'd get really serious about it. And I was doing my own comedy routine in my head, essentially.
I was doing the same kind of thing. And when you say it like a comedy routine in your head, that makes it more familiar for me. I was doing a similar thing, but from the other side. I went to a weird church where we leaned more into the Old Testament than the New Testament. I was running around not trying to scare people, but trying to just spelled out to everybody how it worked. Jesus Christ was a full-blown Hebrew and said in the Bible, like, I'm not here to change the law, but to add to it. So maybe you should not be eating pork and going to church on Saturday.
That's funny.
And shit like that. I was a ruiner, and it was not nice. I think it was similarly kind of a kick to have a little bit of power over other kids, because I knew things that they didn't know, that their parents weren't telling them, perspectives I did not have a full grasp on. I'm not here saying that I had all the answers and they didn't, but I really thought I did. And you weren't commanding the powers of darkness, but you got other kids to think you were.
Right.
Well, and I think that kick is kind of what we see in a lot of these movies in regards to magic and the occult. I mean, we were not ultimately evil kids, but these are folks who are trying to accumulate power for themselves and power over others, power, even in the case of the ninth, power over death. And in the ninth, the character James Reed, who is one of our main character, Olivia's husband, is talking about how their daughter died, and he's saying, we went to one power and got nothing, so now we're going to try another. And it's, okay, we're not trusting in the mainstream. Yes. We're going to the occult, and we're going to find hidden knowledge and hidden power. I guess the differentiation is the church wants you to only come to them. The church wants you to be a follower and not have power. But supposedly what the occult promises you is the knowledge that you're not being told. Like in the Garden of Eden. The knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of what more there is.
Yeah, and
that you aren't being exposed to.
Especially the ninth is, well, I mean, all these movies really, it's about the bad guy. The difference is they want absolute power. They want the absolute power, and they go through all these different kind of crazy ritualistic things to try to harness that absolute power. But, you know, that's gets you in trouble every time.
Well, that's what all these stories are telling us. But I think, unlike, like we were just saying about Agatha all along, I think Agatha all along is part of a different era. That all of these reflect an era where, of course, the bad guys practice magic. Of course, the bad guys are non-Christian and are just trying to gain power. You could also eventually show occultists who are just trying to exercise that power to make good things happen, or to affect people in helpful ways.
They would be a good guy then.
That would be a good guy, kind of like John Constantine, or in our first movie, Dark Intruder, the ever handsome Leslie Nielsen as Brett Kingsford seems to be a guy who knows more, who has magical elements around him all the time, but his motivations are all for good and for protecting people.
Yeah, and what I really liked about this movie, and him in particular, he's very just tongue-in-cheek about it. Like, he has his whole office is all these occultist books and figures, and everything is around him. Like, he is a knowledgeable dude.
And even a psychic mandrake plant.
Right. A psychic
can pick up vibes.
Yes, exactly. But he's very just kind of whatever. Yeah, it's fine. He plays it off just so casually, like he's not this person who's into all this stuff and doing all this stuff, but yet he does have all this knowledge, and they do come to him when they have problems, and there's a problem that happens, and the police commissioner comes to him to try to figure out what's going on. And the nice thing about this being a 1-hour movie is he solves it very quickly.
Oh yeah, I thought a fun thing to do that we're going to talk about when we get done recording at the end is going to be our favorite detectives out of the 6 movies we're talking about, and the scariest villains. Anyone who remembers, everyone check your notes. The list of movies we just read, I bet everyone's guessing who my scariest villain is going to be. But we should get into kind of the individual movies. If we're going to talk about Leslie Nielsen in Dark Intruder from 1965 that was directed by Harvey Hart. It stars Leslie Nielsen, as we said, and Peter Mark Richmond. The synopsis says, Occult Detective Brett Kingsford is called upon to find a killer with the power of demons 1,000,000 years old. Because this is from the 60s and was not all about truth. It was about fun and frights, and was actually originally pitched as a pilot for NBC.
Feels like a pilot. When
Does
you watch it, you're just like,
yeah.
I feel like this is like an occultist Columbo kind of thing that they're doing here.
I was going to say occult Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Where he has a monster of the week or a magician of the week he has to fight against.
Right.
Yeah, this was sold by NBC to Universal Pictures, and then it got distributed as the B feature after William Castle's I Saw What You Did. I don't know if you've seen I Saw What You Did. I watched it when I found this fact. It is so silly. It's about 2 girls who do prank calls where they just call a random number and say, I saw what you did, and I'm going to call the police, something like that. And eventually they call someone who's just killed Joan Crawford. And Joan Crawford is briefly in the movie, and then she's just killed off. And it seems like the kind of movie that your parents would make to scare you off of making prank phone calls.
Yeah. I've never seen the movie, but you saying that. So when I was in 8th grade, we had a sleepover, and I thought it'd be really funny because prank calling was still a thing because there was no caller ID or anything like that back in my 8th grade days.
Not until Blink-182 invented it for that song. Damn them.
Exactly. And I would find in the phone book, because you could also just look up numbers in a phone book. How crazy is that? Right. Someone that had a Mr. and Mrs. So I assumed they had kids. So we would call them. We would call them up at really late in the evening, and get 8 of us around the phone, and we would just whisper, check the children, and just have this echoing check the children.
Oh, that is
thing.
so creepy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so creepy.
So creepy. But it reminds me of when you said that movie, it's just like, oh, I did something really creepy like that. That was one of those really, if you had children, you'd probably scare people kind of moments. And it was children's voices too, because we were like 15 years old.
I Saw What You Did is not as good as that. That would have been a so much better movie. And I don't know if it was just because Joan Crawford was in it that was the A feature. Dark Intruder is a much better movie. I'm sorry that it didn't get picked up and become a series.
It was well shot. It was just It was well crafted. It was, you kind of figured out who everyone was a little bit pretty early on, and it was kind of simple in that regard, but at the same time there was still you were thrown into these oh wait what while you're going throughout it.
I think a lot of that was Leslie Nielsen's performance, because he's like Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne, having that duality of a really affable outside personality who everybody sees, and then behind closed doors he delves back into the darkness, into the magic. In a lot of these movies there's a lot of problematic stuff, not only the demonization of other beliefs, but in 1965's Dark Intruder, Peter Bronco in yellow face.
You can see the makeup on his eyes to make his eyes a little
it's
smaller.
terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
And everything about it, the way he's dressed, is just this. Well, I get that they just probably looked in the costume room and grabbed whatever stock stuff they have, And it's 65. It was a regrettable time in Hollywood history where we just didn't care. Again, when you're dealing with the vague term occult, especially in Hollywood, people will just grab out to anything that looks foreign. They'll just grab any statuette that looks like that looks scary and say, "Oh, this is we're gonna have this be our demon," or any black robe with any kind of symbol on it. One thing I wanted to stay away from was things that use too many pentagrams as a sign, because it's so misunderstood. A lot of movies I looked at for this list would just slap a pentagram on somebody or have them carve a pentagram into their chest and be like, "Oh, look, they're a cult." The second movie on our list, The Ninth, from 2019, that was directed by Nikolai Komariki. Oh, it was so good. And
yeah, it did have some really fun, like for a detective occult kind of movie, it had some fun, like 300 type motion effect fighting stuff, which Russia does really well.
It did. I was going to ask you about the fight scene with Yevgeny Siganov, our lead, who, by the way, is reputed as the main, at least as of 2024, he's reputed as the main film and stage actor in Russia. He's like the biggest name.
I felt that.
Yevgeny Siganov.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. He has a fight scene, and there were so many quick cuts in it. Like, I didn't know what you were noticing as an editor. It seemed to me like before every punch, there was a few frames, or after every punch, there was a few frames cut out, and then all of a sudden it was connecting so much faster than it should have.
It's like they shoot everything in really slow motion and then just lose a bunch of frames right as so you get that little fast moment. Okay. And how do I put this? It's like when I see things like that, it's just like sit back and eat the popcorn because this is gonna be a fun ride. Those kinds of little tricks are just like, oh, you've put cinematic value into this to make a fun I'm going on a ride kind of movie. So when I saw the fight scene, I was like, oh, this is like I don't want to say like, you know, Russian Marvel style or something like that, but it was like, this has got a budget to it that they're doing this kind of stuff.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, it made me think of Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes movies.
Yes, that's a much better comparison.
I mean, we still get Robert Downey Jr., but
I mean, they had I can't even remember the Russian guy's name now, but he apparently is Russia's Robert Downey Jr. So
I worked so hard on this name. It's Yevgeny Saganov. Nope.
It's Yevgeny Saganov.
Saganov.
Sorry for brutalizing that.
And The Ninth also stars Daisy Head, who I recognized from Dungeons and Dragons in 2023. Yes. And I bet this was the movie that got her that role because she plays in Dungeons and Dragons. She's one of like the red sorcerers.
She's like the red sorcerer.
Yeah. This one she plays a medium who can, you know, connect people with their dead loved ones, but her costume and her makeup for it is absolutely fantastic. She looks like a proper Disney evil queen villainess.
Yes, and her henchman, her partner in crime, as it were, is the muscle from Tenet, the Russian guy who played by Kenneth Branagh's like muscle in the movie Tenet, which also, what a movie. So I saw that, I was just like, oh, that's a dude from Tenet. Oh, sweet.
That's so cool. We should tell you what The Ninth is about. It's set in 19th century Russia in St. Petersburg. And it's about a police investigator who's assisted by a British medium, and they're investigating a series of ritual murders. It's, we're going to touch back on Seven because it is, the Ninth is about a ninth victim because throughout the movie there are 8 killings where young women show up with like dashes branded into their skin for the first third and so on, or alchemical symbols. They have like organs cut out, like the eyelids sewn back up and their mouths sewn shut. It's pretty brutal.
It's a proper like serial killer detective movie, and I really enjoyed this because it was that, you know, it's that classic detective of like, no.
The unbeliever versus the...
Exactly.
Yes. Mulder and Scully. Kind of.
Exactly. So he's like going, this is all nonsense. There's something human sinister going on here. This isn't some magical nonsense, and he sticks with that most of the time. And that's kind of the nice thing about this particular, genre in this episode, is that you're always getting this like fantastical world against the practical world and the guy who's the practical, or the person that's the practical, is always investigating the impractical kind of magical, and he's just like, I don't buy this.
What I really liked about Dark Intruder was there was a lot of buy-in from the story that led to buy-in from me, where the story itself established that magic was real, that in I think it's set in 1890. In 1890 in Dark Intruder, they go to Leslie Nielsen when weird things happen because he's the occult detective, and he'll figure it out. With the ninth, we get into the skepticism, and the movie, I appreciated, had a debate within it of a believer versus a non-believer. And one thing I was looking for when I was making this list was that I wanted the magic to be real. A lot of things that were suggested to me about occult detectives were things that I would say were more like Scooby-Doo, where it turns out it's just somebody with a mask and maybe some special effects. But in the ninth, it proves out that Daisy Head's character is right, that magic is real, and the detective is wrong and has to adapt
and go after that person using magic to get the power that they seek to do the magical deed that they want to have done, which is resurrecting their daughter.
Right. And I will point out that go see these movies for fun. If you're listening to this and you enjoy watching movies, don't let it stop you from seeing this just because we tell you what's going on. At the very end, the ninth ritual is completed, but our heroes are safe. And the dead girl that the bad guy was trying to resurrect comes back to life right after the ritual is completed. She's alone far away from where the ritual took place. She's by herself in a big house in the middle of Russia with nobody around. And it's never addressed. No one says, and then the police went and helped this poor lost girl who had been dead, who's now woken up in a strange place. It's
Home Alone Russia style for the sequel.
In our list, we first see in the ninth the idea of human sacrifice, which is kind of a cliche. So much of real occult practices have nothing to do with human sacrifice or harming people. It is a cliche in Hollywood that the bad guys are willing to do some awful transgression, some crime against humanity, like killing kids or killing young women in a bid to gain power.
It's a quick sell. You're like, oh yeah, okay, bad guy.
Right. Oh no, it immediately translates as bad guy. We know, and we know what their goal is, and we know how far they're willing to go for it. Yeah. But it occurred to me, because this comes up in several of the movies we watched, the idea of why that is. Obviously, killing kids is bad. Killing young women is bad. But why do we choose that? And why is that the cliche, especially when it's like a virgin? In so many movies, a virgin has to perform the ritual, or it has to be a virgin sacrifice. One of my favorite examples would be from the Monster Squad.
I was just going to say.
Were you really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. This is why Nick and I are friends.
He doesn't count.
Right. Yeah, because in the Monster Squad, it's somebody's sister who's supposed to like perform the rite to banish the evil away. But then it doesn't work, and they go, what's the matter? And she goes, I never said I was a virgin. You guys just presumed. And this is his older sister, and so the guy then has his younger sister, his 5-year-old sister, read the spell.
Very young.
And then it works. Yeah. It occurred to me, wait a minute, what is the value of having had sex or not having had sex that makes the big difference?
And why couldn't one of the Monster Squad do it? Clearly they were all virgins too.
I mean, wait a minute. Hey. Yeah, why couldn't one of the boys in the Monster Squad do it? And I think that's another key point is, why does it always have to be a girl?
Right. They're always ushering out a virgin woman in some way, shape, or form. It's just like, wait, but...
Well, I have an answer for that.
Oh, shoot.
Because it has nothing to do with sex. Obviously, if your spell needs virgin blood, it's not the having sex or not having had sex. That wouldn't change the blood of anybody. What it is it's about intention. One thing I've learned from a friend of mine who does practice magic is a lot of spells. It's more about intention and not a strict scientific recipe of putting these exact elements together. And
same with meditation. It's like you want to go journeying, like you would see something, you have to set your intention if you want to see it.
Right on. The example I was given for different intentions and spells was if a spell were to say, you have to mix all these things together and you have to bring nails from a coffin, as an example. The idea behind that, or the intention behind that, is that you have to get something that was hard for you, or something that felt transgressive.
Right.
So it's not necessarily coffin nails that you need, because if you work in a mortuary and have ready access to coffin nails, then that's not an effort for you or transgression for you, depending on what is needed. And then you might pick something else that would satisfy that. That's why I think a virgin girl as a sacrifice, or virgin's blood, is because you're stealing something away. And this goes back to more agrarian cultures, like pre-Christian stuff, and some Old Testament stuff too. It's about taking a resource away from a community. In an agrarian kind of culture, and this is not how we view people today, but a young woman is somebody who can still have lots of kids and add to the community.
Right.
And add to the culture. And the thing is, women have value above and beyond that. That's not the way to look at them. And so repeating this idea of a virgin female sacrifice is just sort of reinforcing that very reductionist idea. But that's, I think, where it comes from, is now as a potential second generation that could come from this young woman, if she became a mother, that's going to be cut off from the culture, or cut off from that family. That is a transgression. To take that away from other people, to take that away from a family, is evil. And so that villain is setting their intention by being willing to cross that line. Painting it as we'll go that far. We will cut off generations from your family.
But now the virgin thing can lead us into cast a deadly spell, because that does require a virgin sacrifice.
Well, that was one thing that you brought up. You emailed me after you watched Cast a Deadly Spell, was sort of the problematic nature. Much like in Monster Squad, the workaround for how to beat the bad guy was a virgin girl sacrifice, and they beat it through old-fashioned premarital sex.
Yes. Now, the statutory rape stuff in Cast a Deadly Spell, that's where it kind of got a little... for me.
That was bad.
Just disclaimers right away. Cast a Deadly Spell is... I have a lot of good things to say about this movie. The statutory rape thing, especially being the hero,
bad.
And the zombies as slaves, and they all just so happen to be black. And it's like, that's a little rough too. Like, those two things are like, ooh, beware this movie for those two things.
Absolutely. It was... So, Cast a Deadly Spell from 1991 was directed by Martin Campbell. It stars Fred Ward, famous voice actor Clancy Brown, and Julianne Moore. Yeah. The synopsis is, in a fantastical 1948 Los Angeles, where magic is used by everyone, a hard-boiled detective investigates the theft of a mystical tome. Now, this movie really takes a lot, like I said before, it's like Who Framed Roger Rabbit mixed with H.P. Lovecraft, so much so that the main character is Detective Harry P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
And they're eventually looking for the Necronomicon that the bad guy will use to summon one of the old ones. And part of the spell is a virgin girl, and we know this because she is a unicorn hunter. In this magical LA of 1948, she has a whole estate that apparently has unicorns on it, where she can spend her days hunting them. And as we all know, only virgins can do that, and only virgins can be near unicorns. And of course, we're going to kill the most beautiful creature in all of mythology.
Yeah, I like this movie because it sets up it's a world builder. It's like a perfect thing for a movie to be. It just sets...
It's really good at it.
Yeah, it's like LA, and everyone uses magic. Except our H.P. Lovecraft detective. He's
got to go against the grain.
He's got to go against the grain.
Outsider.
He's gonna figure it out the old-fashioned detective way, and it's fun because everyone's using magic. So there's, everyone's trying to outdo the other person magically. Mm-hmm. There's a scene where there's a guy who gets killed with a death by 10,000 paper cuts. That's like, whoa, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, some guy just rips up a piece of paper and then turns it into a paper tornado.
Yeah,
paper cuts this guy to death.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, and it's still like it's very 40s like mafioso kind of.
It's got everything. It's got a big ballroom scene with a big band. It has some great music.
Julianne Moore's the singer, like the singer at the club.
Julianne Moore is the club singer, but her voice is dubbed.
Oh, yeah.
It was Darlene Coldenhoven, who actually does the singing. Oh, and if you look up Coldenhoven, she has had lots of roles in musical movies, including Sister Act 2, and Spy Hard, which had Leslie Nielsen in it.
Yes, it did. Yes,
the world building in Cast a Deadly Spell is absolutely fantastic. Every single scene will have somebody in the background, either pouring a martini with telekinesis just floating in the air, or one time our detective goes to a mechanic and the mechanic is complaining about gremlins in the engine, and he pops open the hood and there's all these cute little mogwai looking gremlin puppets.
Yep, and so many practical effects, creature effects in this movie too.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
it's so good. This was made in 1991, but it still has the vibrancy of 80s practical effects.
Yeah.
One bad thing that you did just bring up was they have zombies in this movie, and they take the time to point out that these are products that they import from the West Indies, and they're all just black people who have been zombified.
Yeah.
And on one hand, that is exactly what would happen in the 1940s that we know if things like zombies and magic were real, because of systemic racism, because of how bad American history has been. But watching it,
but it's still pretty fucked up.
No, it's fucked up. Watching in 2025, it's fucked up, and especially as how naturally and casually it's in a world that's not addressing it in any way. They're just showing it to you.
Yeah, and they also make a point of like, well, don't they die after like 5 months? Hey, just get new ones. It's like, oh,
how disposable they are.
Yeah, how disposable, like, exactly.
And you can give this movie credit for saying it's a commentary on exploitative labor practices. You can say that it's a stark reflection of the attitudes towards people of color in the 1940s in America. You can give it a lot of credit. I even read one article that went so far as to suggest that throwing in something like that was a dark homage to H.P. Lovecraft, who was known to have been a racist.
Yeah.
And saying that if we're making a world based on his work, even if it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, half-comedic, fun movie, we're still going to include the darkness because those were things he believed in. Those were things he put in his books.
Right.
I don't think I like that.
Yeah, they could have done a better job of pointing out how bad that was.
I know this movie is not a satire, but one of my rules when it comes to appreciating satire and comedy is it's not as satirical if you're just repeating the thing that you're trying to comment on.
Right.
If you're not adding an ironic juxtaposition where you're showing the bad thing as bad, or how if the bad thing were good, it still wouldn't work because it's just so inherently wrong. That's not what this movie's doing. It's playing into it. And you have to, as we're doing right now, you have to discuss it and understand and look at it more deeply. But on face value, no, none of that was fun.
He was kind of a racist piece of shit.
It makes me have to, dry my teeth. I'm just sitting there going,
yeah, exactly.
That stings.
Exactly. It's the stuff that movies are made of. Like, it's got all the great elements of a fun movie with, those little things inside of it. They're just like, oh, guys, this is really in poor taste.
And to add to that, there's a homosexual couple in the movie that is kind of at the center of the story, but they are abused, or one of them, Lily, is abused by our hero, by our detective, with homophobic slurs. And I just went, oh, the 90s. This movie was produced by HBO. And I went, oh, HBO in the 90s. So you have nobody looking at you saying, we got to make this sell. We got to make sure we don't offend anybody.
Right.
Not that we were actually being sensitive or caring about people in the 90s as well as we are now.
Oh yeah, it was a paid cable channel. You had to pay extra.
So, yeah, anyone who's interested in this movie,
asterisks. There are asterisks.
So yeah, exactly, huge asterisk. If you're curious about it, now you know before you go into it. And if any of this makes you feel like, no, not the movie for me, I'm glad we were here for you. I'm glad we let you know it in advance.
Yep.
And frankly, our next movie from 1995, Lord of Illusions, carries with it a lot of similar caveats.
Yes, it does.
It's directed by Clive Barker, directed and written by Clive Barker, starring Scott Bakula, Daniel von Bargen, and Kevin J. O'Connor. The synopsis for Lord of Illusions is, during a routine case in L.A., private investigator Harry D'Amour discovers a fanatical cult preparing for the resurrection of their leader, the powerful magician Nyx. What I liked about this movie, similarly to Cast a Deadly Spell, a lot of the visuals, a lot of the world building, definitely feel like you've walked into somebody else's situation that works with unique rules. The occult, perhaps, but it does have things like, again, the sacrifice of a young girl right at the beginning. The young girl is rescued by a magician named Swan, who's played by Kevin J. O'Connor.
It turns into Famke Janssen, so, good on you.
Yeah. But then weird things later on, and definitely because it's Clive Barker, this is something that, if you know anything about his work, if you've seen Hellraiser, he brings the blood, he brings the gore, he brings the pain.
When he does practical, I feel like he does practical quite well. They do practical effects pretty well. He's kind of a gory guy in that magical realm.
Much like in Hellraiser, in Lord of Illusions, you'll see a lot of flesh ripping, and sinew and muscle exposed, and
you'll say, "Ow, that looks like it hurts."
Yeah. It's all very visceral. I watched it behind the scenes that Clive Barker spoke a lot in about. His goal is to get a visceral reaction from the audience, to recoil and to be taken aback by what you're seeing. And it absolutely works.
Yes, his shot selection could have been better, as I will say, I found this movie a little difficult to watch based on Clive Barker's direction. He just didn't, it had kind of all the elements for a good 90s kind of gory, magical horror movie, but it just, there was just something not right. I was saying before this, 1995 is the same year that Seven came out, which is kind of the other side of Occult, where he's doing more of the religious, ritualistic thing. But watching that movie, because I was like, they're both 95. I watched it right after just for, shits and giggles.
Oh, wow. How was that for a double feature?
But it just looking at it from a directorial perspective, it's just like, Seven is an extraordinarily well-directed film. Like, it's so well-directed. And Lord of Illusion feels like a student film as far as it was directed.
I don't know if this counts. Clive Barker's only directed 3 movies.
Yeah.
This, Nightbreed, and Hellraiser. He's more of a writer, which I'm a horror fan. These days, when I was little, I was terrified of horror movies. I've gotten more into it as an adult. And Clive Barker's name is so big in my mind. I didn't realize all the movies attributed to him are mostly because he was a writer.
Yeah,
and not
novelist.
Not a director as well, like Wes Craven or somebody.
Yeah. And he's a great writer. He's a really great writer. But it's like, I don't think David Fincher is a very good writer. I don't think he writes anything. I think he just directs. And that there's a reason. It's like, good directors are special. Clive
Barker's also a really acclaimed visual artist and painter.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of that in the movie, especially because this movie centers around magicians. That's where kind of the dual significance in the title being Lord of Illusions. Kevin J. O'Connor's character, after rescuing the little girl in the beginning, they cut to like 10 or 15 years later, and he's now like the biggest magical act in LA, and they actually film one of his shows, and it's a whole big David Copperfield thing with these weird, almost Giger-esque set pieces
and showgirl kind of dancers and everything.
Yeah. They all look like a little bit. I even thought of Cronenberg, of kind of a body horror kind of imagery.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself as I watched it, I was like, I bet John Carpenter would have done this well, because it's got that kind of tongue-in-cheek thing too, and it's like, I think he could have made this thing, because even like Scott Bakula's character, D'Amour, as a detective, he was solid. Like, the lines were good, the story was good, but I could feel his overacting from his lack of direction. that was my issue with this movie overall, was the lack of direction. I want to just say one thing that I couldn't get out of my head is Famke Janssen and Daniel Van Bargen later appeared in The Faculty, and I know Daniel Van Bargen from like the, is this going to be on the test? This is the test. He was that professor. So those two were both the teachers in that movie. So I was like, oh, look, another horror movie where these two got started.
I mean, he's also the evil police chief in Super Troopers.
Yes.
And why he's so good at that is because he has that presence.
Yeah, he's a good
very
bad
intimidating.
guy.
He seems like a drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Carries that authority with him just on his face.
Yeah.
Which is also fun to see interviews with him behind the scenes, because he, like Robert De Niro or Al Pacino, when you see them behind the scenes, they're really affable and they're really nice guys. They're somebody's grandpa.
Yes. So there's a scene at the end of this movie that I'd like to talk about, because as far as the practical effects go, like after they remove this mask from him and he's got gnarly skin, he's got this third eye thing that like, there's like this thing that comes out of his third eye, like in this gross, and I just was like, I don't know how you did that. That's incredible. I think that's amazing. Whatever that third eye thing was, that was amazing.
It does seem to be an orifice of some kind.
Yeah.
Right where a third eye would be.
Yeah, it's like this little turd just keeps coming in and out of it. But it was amazing. I was like, oh, it's so gnarly.
Well, also the prosthetic the mechanized prosthetic he's wearing that's making this happen is so close to his skin.
Yeah.
I mean, they made a great visual choice. To what we're talking about is after Nick's, the evil magician, Nick's character has been buried for 13 years after trying to kill the little girl in the beginning, and he had this awful, terrible Cenobite looking mask screwed onto his face. So now that he's been resurrected and the mask has been taken off, his whole face is turned into something that looks unreal.
Yeah. And a good moral of this story, I think, too.
Oh, there's a moral?
Don't follow evil people, because the followers all just get screwed completely.
Oh,
they
man.
Just like, they're all like worshiping and following, and then at the end it's just like expendable. So don't follow evil people.
There's some good, like I said, good special effects in this.
There were some good special effects in it. I mean, it wasn't like, I can't hate on this movie completely, because it had enough elements that were just like, okay, I get that. Go into it with a kind of silly, taking itself too seriously 90s horror film vibe, and you'll come out of it going like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. The performances were all pretty good. The effects were really good. The idea was really good. It rounded out kind of nicely.
On our Letterboxd account, the Miscellaneous Film Festival Letterboxd, I've started a list of movies that I think could be worthy of a remake. And I would put this on there as it's an idea that'd be worth somebody re-exploring, but with the caveat that they have to bring this level of practical effects and visuals into it.
Yeah, why don't we remake bad movies? We keep remaking the good movies. That just seems like a bad idea.
Well, that's what most of the things on this list
could have been better.
Movies, but could have been better, where there's a seed of a good idea somewhere in there that just didn't get a chance because of budget or technology at the time. We were talking about, in one scene of Lord of Illusion, there's a CGI monster that is in the behind the scenes featurette. They called him Origami Man because he's supposed to be two-dimensional and he can fold up into geometric shapes and move around. And it's the early 90s still, and the CGI wasn't that great.
Yeah, it looks like effects on a computer, but in reality, it's very computer-generated geometrical movement, like weird science kind of.
Does it look like a screensaver?
Yeah, a little.
Windows 95
looks a little like a screensaver, like a geometrical screensaver. That's fair. It didn't work. It didn't work in 2025. Let's just put it that way.
But they're doing the best they can, and that would be an example of where I was like, hey, let's take another run at this.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
better technology.
Exactly.
If you decide to watch these films in this order, and you're watching Lord of Illusions, and you follow it up with 2024's Longlegs, directed and written by Osgood Perkins, there you're going to see Nick's comments really play out. It's a stark contrast in directing styles between Clive Barker, who, as I was watching the movie, I thought kind of felt like he was being shot for TV, some of the framing and stuff, whereas Osgood Perkins has an amazing artistic sense about directing and framing shots. Literally and I watched it again just before recording this. Every single shot of 2024's Longlegs is a moving photograph in a good way. Everything's lined up perfectly. On one hand, everything is really square and kind of flat looking. He manages to find a straight line somewhere in the shot and keep it straight. But I think part of that effect is there's such a consistent visual tone all the time. It made the movie flow really smoothly. I felt like I didn't completely leave one scene going into another. It wasn't jarring. One scene could just move into another because they would be framed similarly.
Yeah, I agree. I hadn't seen Longlegs before this, so I watched it. And, I was just like, whoa, that was really fun. That was really good. Like, it was just everything about it. The way that the acting was, just how there was kind of in this FBI world, there's like this taken aback kind of psychic FBI agent woman who's kind of occulty in a way, and then her boss who is kind of more just the typical run-of-the-mill, FBI agent, just like, all right, well, we got to figure it out.
But he's not dismissive, and he's not hard on her. She's been tested by the FBI, and kind of they found evidence of her psychic ability, which I thought was a really neat scene.
Yeah,
because she was able to psychically guess shapes and things 50% of the time, which is, I guess, higher than everybody else. And she points out, well, yeah, it's only 50. That doesn't prove anything. The movie establishes that, magic is real, and she does have these abilities. But that conversation I love because it kept it kind of grounded. While she has these abilities, they're not so fantastic that she can do like anything with them. She's not Professor Xavier.
Right.
But she's just enough that she can in tune where things are. We're talking about Micah Monroe, who plays the lead character, Lee Harker. And her supervisor is played by Blair Underwood, which is really fun to see Blair Underwood in this. He's so cool.
Yeah.
One of the first scenes that establishes Lee's character is she's sent out on one of her first missions. There's a serial killer that they're trying to track down, and she and her partner at the time, like new recruits, they're just partnered up right then. They go into this neighborhood to knock door to door and ask if people have seen this man that they're looking for. And before her partner can go to the first house, she just gets out of the car and says, nope, it's the one across the street. And her partner is our everyman who doesn't know what she's talking about, thinks it's really weird, and says, no, we're not doing that. And she's just keeps saying it with this blank look on her face, just uncompromising. They walk over to the house, and she's right. The killer's right inside. And I love that as a way to establish that she has these abilities. They are real, and they are effective, but they are not so fine-tuned, or they can even take her by surprise.
Right. And there's something special about her as a result, too, because she was with a guy who was just as experienced as she was in the FBI, and he just got, taken out.
He gets, by the way, quickly. He gets blown away as soon as he knocks on the door.
Immediately. Yeah, because he just doesn't have that Sixth Sense. It's kind of, I was talking to a buddy of mine today, and he was like, that's kind of like Sixth Sense, or not Sixth Sense. This movie's kind of like Silence of the Lambs. And I was like, yeah, kind of. But in the Jodie Foster just having that special thing where she could connect in a particular way, it's like, I can see that. I can see that.
And to be fair, the character of Lee Harker also does a lot of great detective work.
Yeah.
And does her fair share of investigating, not only with her abilities as things come to her, but she puts the legwork in to track down our killer, who goes by the name Longlegs, and is played by Nicolas Cage. I've said before that my theory on Nicolas Cage is sometimes he has a character he wants to play or a style of acting he wants to try out, and he will bring that to a project, and if the director isn't strong enough, Nicolas Cage will take over and do his own thing, and then that's when you get weird Nicolas Cage. But if you find a director that's willing to work with him and has a vision of his own that he can get Nicolas Cage to subscribe to, then you get really amazing dramatic Nicolas Cage who can still be weird, and that's what we get in this movie. We get a very well-crafted, weird character from Nicolas Cage that is unnerving and so creepy.
Yeah.
And gives him a
right
chance
from the get-go.
Yeah.
When he's introduced, like, I put on my long legs, and then he squats down to talk to the girl, and you just see You just see kind of half of his face. You're like, whoa.
Yeah, his face looks almost like someone who's had a lot of plastic surgery. I don't know, and they never explain why he looks that way. The character of Longlegs is a doll maker. He makes these very eerie, life-size replicas of little girls who he is targeting. Again, killing small girls in the name of evil.
They kind of look puppet mastery.
They look puppet mastery, yeah. But they do one shot of they have a square straight-on shot of one of these dolls, and it fades out, but it fades out into a shot of Nicolas Cage's Longlegs. And for a half second, when they both are at like 50% opacity. So you're seeing the doll face and Nicolas Cage's face at the same time. And that to me was a visual cue that, we're supposed to see his face as doll-ish or doll-like, as if he maybe crafted his face himself somehow. I did like when you brought up that when we first meet him, the phrase he uses, "I've got my long legs on," I realized was kind of a cutesy phrase an adult might use when talking to a child.
Yep.
To represent like, "Oh, I'm bigger and taller than you. Let me quote unquote, take my long legs off or whatever and get down to your level," which is something I've learned is a very responsible and respectful thing to do with kids. When you're talking to kids, you don't need to stand up tall and look over them and make them crane their necks up. If you can get down on their level and talk to them eye to eye, that's a better way to have a conversation with a kid.
However, in a movie like this, you realized, this is going to be about child murder, isn't it?
It is, but it's also kind of about childhood and growing up and the traumas and privileges that entail growing up.
Sacrifices of a mom as well.
To protect a kid, like how far would you go?
Yep.
That scene where he says, "I've got my long legs on," it cuts from that right to Lee Harker being an adult, and in the meeting for the mission we were just talking about with all of her FBI peers, and the FBI director or chief officer explaining what's going on, explaining what their instructions are, the first thing he says was, "Okay, kids, this is the part where you get to do the things the grown-ups don't want to do anymore." And it sets the tone going forward for the rest of the movie that there is a power dynamic between adults and kids. There is kind of a road to growing up, or in the case of Lee Harker, she was meant to be a victim of Longlegs, but her mother decides to become Longlegs' accomplice to protect her daughter from being a victim. One thing that's repeated is Lee Harker was allowed to grow up because of this sacrifice. So the whole movie kind of circulates around the difference between being a child and being an adult and kind of where that changes.
And the sacrifice of her mom, actually, I would say is almost paramount to her extraordinary kind of psychic ability as well, because that kind of grew out of that too. So it's like this sacrifice that the parents made allowed for this daughter to have this ability to be the best at what she wanted to be.
There's a lot of individual character relationships that also reflect this, like with her boss, Agent Carter. He comes into things as obviously her superior. She is the younger, the minor to his major, but he drinks a lot. She doesn't drink at all. He's constantly asking her to explain things because she's figuring things out faster than him and better than him. It kind of reminded me of somebody's dad who doesn't know how to use computers or doesn't know how to use their new phone, where supposedly he's the authority in this dynamic, but she knows more and she's ahead of the game and having to explain things to him. She also has the same relationship with her mother. After her first day investigating, she goes home and calls her mom, and her mom seems to be a little out of it. But the way Lee talks to her mom is differential, like you would be with a child, where you're looking out for them, checking on them to make sure they're okay, but still recognizing that mother-daughter dynamic of that. You know, if her mom tells her to say her prayers, she says she will say her prayers. She doesn't, because she's actually in charge of herself and is the one actually looking out for her mother. So there's a lot of that. And then that's where our villain comes in as someone who is wrecking child, so destroying families, executing power in a vicious way that steals life and cuts people off before they have a chance to become adults. And that sacrifice, that transgression, is supposedly what, through the magic spell of these dolls he makes, is going to connect him with the darkness and he'll live forever.
And I think that the most interesting thing for me with the dolls and the killing thing is how the whole movie, you're set up in this mystery that you're just like, what is happening here? Because you know that it's this serial killer type person that's doing this, but they can never find evidence that he's there. All they have is his letters.
Yeah, the murders are done by the family members themselves.
Right. It's like a murder-suicide thing, but they always have the letter from this killer. That's how it's like there's a serial killing going on, but there's no evidence that he's ever there. So it's this weird, like, whoa. How do you figure that one out?
It's a great whodunit. It's great all the way to the end. Even when they seem to, in the middle, when they seem to explain that the dolls are able to execute some kind of psychic power over the family and turn them on themselves, there's still more mystery, more mysterious layers all the way up to the end.
All the way to right. Yeah, exactly. It just keeps on. As soon as you find something or catch someone or figure something out, then you realize, oh crap, we missed this part of it. There's this part of it. It gets so much more complicated.
It's really great storytelling. And I love,
absolutely.
I do love a movie because it's a given that things supposedly happened before the movie started, but we can't concern ourselves with that. We have to accept that only what we're given from the beginning to the end of the movie is the whole world. So when 3/4 of the way through a movie, I'm having a lot of questions because it seems like we've wrapped things up. We've caught the bad guy, or we've killed the bad guy, or whatever. And what else is going on? I do appreciate a movie that recognizes its own loose ends and ties them up.
Yeah, and almost the loose ends are part of the mystery.
Nope.
Yeah.
This was so well done.
Yeah, agreed.
So this is the same guy, the director and writer of this, also did the adaptation of Stephen King's The Monkey that's now out in theaters. Have you seen it yet?
I haven't. I remember I've seen Monkey Shines,
which is
the original one that was, yeah.
Tell us about. I have not. Do you mind giving me 2 cents on Monkey Shines?
I just remember it was a monkey made people do some really fucked up stuff, and it was really bloody. I saw it when I was a kid, so it's been a long time. But it was that the monkey had psychic powers over the person, and they were trying to get rid of the monkey.
Oh, cool! That I have not seen the original or this one yet, but watching Longlegs again, I was thinking I'm going to watch the next Osgood Perkins movie. Okay, I might go check out. Might have to do a double feature of the original and the remake.
Yeah, I mean the original. I remember it was not a good movie.
Well,
but it was a
whenever
scary
I saw
movie.
the box art for the original Monkey Shines, and it was just that toy monkey with cymbals that claps.
It was a great trailer.
Okay, well, if you say it's a great trailer, it must have been a really good trailer.
I think it was just like a voiceover and the monkey just like doing this, and the camera just got closer and closer to the monkey. It was just doing the cymbals thing.
The very last one on our list for Occult Detectives is The Waves of Madness, also from 2024, directed and starring
Jason Trost.
There's a story behind us getting to watch this movie and getting to talk about this movie.
Yes, this movie is it's only been released in festivals so far.
In New Zealand and Australia, not even the US.
Yes. I think he tried, but they just weren't. They weren't feeling it. Jacin has made a lot of movies. He makes micro budget movies, and he makes them for like essentially. He goes and works, makes enough money to make a movie, which is anywhere from like $20,000 to $40,000. These are micro budget films, and then he does all the work himself. When he was 18, I cut his first short film.
Oh wow! The Waves of Madness. The synopsis is: a special agent is dispatched to investigate a distress call from an ocean liner, only to find the ship eerily abandoned and haunted by a malevolent force that twists sanity into terror. That's a great line. I love that.
Yeah, good synopsis.
And I mean, right off the bat, you kind of know what tone you're getting into because one of the first shots is zooming in from afar on the ocean liner that's called the Elder of the Seas. So the Lovecraftian atmosphere is right there from the beginning. So we got Special Agent LeGrasse taking a boat out to this ocean liner, boarding the ship, and finding that everyone is dead except for a single survivor who was locked up in the brig. And that turns out to be Tally Wickham, who's playing
Jason's wife.
Oh, really?
Yep. Oh, I'm telling you, he's got a tight knit crew of folks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Because I was looking for the through line of this movie, which, unlike others in our list, this one has a clear through line. It's about grief. It's about coping with loss. Our character, Special Agent LaGrasse, is on this mission after having lost his wife, and now that he's on this possessed ship, he's having flashbacks of that grief, as if the evil force is trying to distract him from his mission. And now I'm realizing that what an interesting set of scenes for a couple to have to play, where his wife is dying and it's a husband and a wife playing those roles. I'm wondering how much fun they had with that, or if that was.
Oh, I'm assuming they're having a lot of fun with these things. Like they enjoy the making of all these films for sure.
Okay, cool.
From what I gather, anyway. But yeah, the kind of, for me, the genius of it is like he's a secret agent, but he's doing this detective work. Like you going into a video game, like a Resident Evil thing. Oh, you went into a house. Now you got to figure out like where this part is to get you to this part, to get you to this part, to get you to this part, to get you to the main monster. And
of all the movies to be slapped with the cliche criticism of, this is a video game movie, it's just playing out like a video game. This movie does not feel like that. I know other movies where the action is just taking you from one stage to another, or one boss to another to fight. This one has so much drama weaved into it, and more depth to the story weaved into it, that it is, even though it is like we just said, it's playing with some video game cliches of how characters move, cutting to scenes that are shot slightly different or from a different angle in the way that you would in a video game.
A side-scrolling video game. Yeah, at that. I was definitely immersed in the world and was able to follow the story without getting caught up in that. Yeah, and you're kind of put into these, just like in a side-scroller, like you're not sure what's to the right or to the left as you're moving through, because you're moving through and then you're into the next and you're into the next. So things are being slowly revealed to you, like they're being revealed to you as a character in a side-scrolling video game. So there's this mystery element as he's going through the thing, and where that could come off really hokey if you do it wrong, and if you don't have a decent story to follow through and a decent dialogue, decent everything, like it could come off really cheesy. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people were afraid of this movie, is they just immediately just went,
afraid of the concept of it.
Oh, just like in trying to get into film festivals and stuff like that, people just were not buying into it. Because I was, when I talked to Jacin about it, I was like, I can't believe no one is. Are they even watching this movie? Like, are they just seeing what the premise is and seeing it's a side-scrolling movie, just going ugh and rolling their eyes like pretentious assholes? Because it's a side-scrolling movie that works. That proves that a side-scrolling movie can actually work, and work well. It's a really well-crafted film, and the kind of mind that has to build this kind of movie in a side-scrolling way is like, it's so intricate, so really well thought that, you could make this movie just like a regular movie and it would be fine, but to add that extra element to it and do it this way gives it some. I don't know. It's a world that he built that exists in the way that he shot it in a really flawless way for me. I was just like, wow. I had no notes when I first saw it. I was like, this is great.
Well, and you talked about his ambition to make a Castlevania movie this way.
Yeah,
I saw at the very end, not to spoil anything, but at the very end it teases a sequel, much like this kind of movie would inevitably, like so many others that a sequel never manifested. I figure with Jason Trost, it will. If he wants to do it, he will take the time to make it happen. The sequel teased is called The Castellum of Blood. Is that sort of halfway between this, The Waves of Madness, and a hopeful Castlevania movie?
I gotta think it is.
I mean, that's from the name. It sounds like, okay, we're going to show what this would look like, not on an ocean liner, but in a mysterious castle somewhere with probably more traditional like vampire monsters.
ultimately, I think the Castlevania thing would be, his North Star. But again, like, this movie proves it. It's just like, yeah, this does it. This is it. Everything that he did to try to pull off this particular style of film that's never been done before,
right,
worked. It all worked. Yes, that is the world of Jacin Trost, for sure. And this one, I think, was him. He's getting older, so he's getting a little more serious, but like not very serious because he's still Jacin Trost. So the side-scrolling thing, I think,
making art about grief. That's a sign of getting serious.
Exactly. And I think he's reached the point now in his career where he's like, I want to make Castlevania. Mm-hmm. I really want to make Castlevania, but I really want to make it as a side-scrolling movie. So I have to prove that I have the chops to be able to pull this off. So I think that's where this all kind of stems from.
Do you think that people would give him the license to make the Castlevania movie and make it like this?
Because
remember when they made the Doom movie and they did first-person shooter perspective and it was dumb?
Right. I think that's kind of the.
Because
if you're making a movie at that level, you're not gonna have any freedom.
No.
Like his next, like he even told me, like, Umbrella is, if he can sell enough Blu-rays with Umbrella, they'll pay for the next one. And I think the next one's going to be his Castlevania,
the Castellum of Blood.
Right. So he kind of does that one, makes his Castlevania movie, and then maybe a studio lets him do a Castlevania movie that has moments that are in like 2D or side-scrolling.
We have gotten to the point in the evening, ladies and gentlemen, when Nick's cats are now battling at his feet. So we got to sum this up.
Thanks everyone for listening, and hail Satan.
Oh my goodness. That's it. Before he says hail Satan again, we're calling it. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time. Any links to videos we've discussed or articles we talked about, we share those on our social media, including Blue Sky and Facebook. You can also find more episodes and shorts on YouTube and Spotify. We'll see you next time. Cheers.